Time for the State Senator Daniel Sparks, who is Chairman of Economic and Workforce Development in the Senate. Good morning, sir. How are you?
Good morning, Paul. That was a great lead-in.
7 million men, and he specifically said men, so 7 million men in this country just not working, decided able-bodied, should be, but are not working or seeking employment. And we lead the nation in that, by the way.
Well, it's one of the most concerning things that we deal with when you talk about someone who says, I don't have opportunity because a job doesn't pay a certain amount. It was funny last night you had tweeted out, or SuperTalk had tweeted out, it'd be on this morning, and there was a question that said, I'd like for you to talk about raising wages. And I think from that tweet, they meant the government intervening and forcing wages up, which is, of course, not a good economic principle. And my reply was, that's exactly what we are focused on, and we've done a less than stellar job in the past with our training and preparing young people for high-wage, high-demand jobs. You know, education is not supposed to train for what they want to train and then hope there are jobs. You actually look out into the job market. You try to do the best to look into the future of what's going to be in high demand, and that's one of the things in the last, I hope, 4 or 5 years that we've really done in the workforce and economic development front is through Accelerate and through other entities to try to identify people in the 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th grade, what their interests are, but also to share with them what are high-wage, high-demand jobs, instead of just saying, go get any 4-year degree because it will, mean something. Well, unfortunately, sometimes it means you have debt and you do not have a high-wage, high-demand job.
If you look at the way that the country is trying to do this, or the administration is trying to do this, it's the wrong way to do it. It's like building on a sand foundation. You can't do it as far as raising the minimum wage over and over and over. Story this morning from California. They've right now lost over 10,000 jobs, and this is rapidly escalating every single week. Over 10,000 jobs have been lost so far just since the minimum wage has been increased. And businesses are shutting down and leaving the state of California in droves. They can't do it. They can't make it. At $20 to $25 an hour for somebody to flip a burger.
Well, if you remember about 3 or 4 years ago, it was the fight for 15. That was Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders. And what they did is they, again, allowed the government to intervene and force wages, particularly in that case by competing with industry with their PPP loans and a lot of things that happened during the COVID pandemic. But they've driven the wages up, and then people realize when you do that, it creates inflation. You have supply that is less than demand, and all of a sudden you make $15 an hour or $20 an hour, but your buying power is less than what it was when you made $12 an hour. So we just have to quit trying to fight against economic principles because they're going to prevail.
It is amazing. At the same time, this guy Gavin Newsom holds a press conference talking about his when he was doing this. It's all coming to fruition, and it's working out beautifully in California as far as the minimum wage, which is a lie. But he's also said the same thing about homelessness. They are doing something in California. I'll have the story later. They're actually putting up high rises for the homeless, giving them everything. I mean, and most of these are going to be illegal aliens who are here. It is unbelievable. We'll talk about that a little bit later on. But one other thing here, and hopefully this doesn't permeate the state of Mississippi, but just almost like the Whole Foods thing as far as corporate America. This is another one that's tremendously disturbing, and I believe this was in Illinois. Let's see here.
Iowa is about to change.
Iowa. It's in Iowa, a little town in Iowa.
Iowa is about to change drastically, and not for the better. Tyson Foods announced that it will be permanently closing its pork factory in Perry, killing around 1,200 jobs in a town of just 8,000 people. The company is now offering new jobs to asylum seekers in other states like New York. Bloomberg says Tyson's tracking migrants in a massive database. They scroll through the data like Facebook. You see a worker you like? Tap, hire. They even had a job fair.
Tyson Fair in New York City not so long ago, where Tyson was basically making this pitch.
They did a database for these new asylum seekers in New York City. So these people would come in, they'd learn a little bit about the company, and for the most part, Tyson had already gone through their various details of their application. And so many of them, 17 the day I was there, and then another 70 a couple weeks later, went off to Tennessee to go start their new jobs as Tyson production workers.
They're firing Americans and offering perks to illegals. This was the Democrat plan all along.
They're firing American workers and hiring illegal aliens to replace them. It reduces the wages of American workers by replacing American citizens with foreign laborers who are willing to work at slave wages. It has been the plan, as you said, from the beginning, and what this means is the eradication of the American dream.
Now, I mention that simply because as a state senator, and again on your committee as far as workforce development, and being in that area of the state where we have some concerns about 2,000 Nicaraguan kids coming in to the Tunica area, if that should happen. Also, in New Albany, there was this a move from one of the churches to bring in some illegals into that. Your thought, is that something that needs to be addressed in the next legislative session?
Well, I think there's so much of it that goes on at the border, and we've seen what Texas is trying to do in some other states from a state level, because the federal government has failed so miserably for the last several decades on the border. It is now permeated to the states, and not just the border states. So they're looking for ways, and it does go back to generating funds. You know, one of the toughest questions probably in this committee is how strong of an E-Verify law do you want? Because if you move for stronger E-Verify laws and you raise the cost on remittances, then all of a sudden, and you hold people accountable, then all of a sudden the jobs are not available, and people coming across the border are coming for a better opportunity. That may include a bevy of benefits, but it may also include a job. And then, just as your clip at the top of the hour, or the top of the show said, you know, we have people that are not even actively looking for work. So we have created a dynamic in this country that for our own citizenry, we have rewarded not working, because we will create just enough wealth transfer so that you can get by without working. And now business is saying we need help. We need people. So they're hard pressed to be so strong on E-Verify, because they literally don't have enough people working the jobs. But the issue in Tunica is concerning, because you're dealing with minors, and so much of what has probably occurred, unfortunately, with those minors before they even got across the border is horrific, and there probably are services they need just simply because they basically, in a lot of cases, been trafficked, and yet what services are available for them other than a housing, shelter, and food out there in the Tunica area? And then the question became, was this a rotation of 30 days, 60 days? Who's going to educate them? Who's going to oversee them? And then you think about teenagers, no matter where they come from, being in close proximity in a hotel to other teenagers. I mean, the supervision would need to be great no matter who they are. But it's a concern, and it's another one of those circumstances where we continue to create a problem and then just hope it doesn't manifest itself, but it is manifesting.
They gave us a little glossy presentation on that one, and I understand that they were trying to make a sale. But at the same time, it was contradictory. We're talking about long-term schooling and health care and jobs, et cetera, et cetera. And at the same time, as you alluded to, we were told it was like a stopover, maybe of about 3 months. You can't have both of those.
That's right. And at the end of the day, it was $150 a room per day for rooms that are currently not being utilized. So someone economically they are going to put up a glossy picture because they want to generate that revenue.
Don't you? And I want to talk about this when we come back, because that kind of bumps into the Medicaid expansion that's going to be front and center for the next legislative session. When we talk about that workforce development in our state, we have 40,000 jobs, as often quoted, that just disappeared before the pandemic, and after the pandemic, where were the 40,000? 40,000 people who just didn't go back to work. Now, some of that could have been retired folks who said, I'm not going to do it again, but still, it was a sizable amount. How do we address and fashion a Medicaid expansion program that addresses that? Back with more coming up next. Hill Jack and I Kiss Miss Mississippi. Again, our congratulations to Becky Williams, the new Miss Mississippi, formerly Miss Capital City. Did you watch any of that?
I did not get to watch any of that. I was actually out of town this weekend. I'd gone up to D.C. for Mississippi on the Mall was this weekend.
Yeah.
A great program put together by the Mississippi Society. But I'll tell you what else I did catch was some clips of the Ole Miss women's track team who won the 4x100 meter relay, and then one young lady who was a part of that team won the 100 and 200 meter national champions, as I understand. So we got some fast runners here in the state of Mississippi at the University of Mississippi. So
That was over the week. That was over the weekend.
It was over the weekend. It's great.
I haven't asked you anything about SB 2799, and we have plenty of time for that one. But the public officials appointment, revised term of office appointments, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, which I still disagree with. But it doesn't become effective till what?
The majority
28?
Majority of that is 27. It would be the purpose behind it, and it got trimmed down quite a bit. And we listened to a lot of the folks that were talking. The key points of it is to have a proper process to make sure that we don't have open seats, empty seats, and there is a rotation. It's not your typical 1 seat per year type rotation, but we'll continue to work on that. I think some of the conversation this year, revolved around who needs to be advised and consented. So you very well may see between now and the time that truly goes into effect that you would see some people removed from advising consent. We just want to target what needs to be targeted.
Senator, which agencies are in that law that was signed by the governor?
There were about 9. I apologize, Paul. I should probably know that off the top of my head, but I don't, because we had so many moving parts. There were about 160,000. We had one issue that we dealt with on the Real Estate Commission, that we had one of those old 5 congressional districts, and by the way, some of them got pulled out because there was other legislation that had already addressed that board. But since the 50s, we have some of it back to the old 7 congressional, the old 5 congressional. It was just it was pretty tough to get people appointed out of the proper area, and so we ended up with about 9 or 10 in there. We did address that, for instance, the Commissioner of Correction should be advised and consented every 4 years. That doesn't need to be a one-time advise and consent. That budget is pushing toward $500 million. And we just need to make sure that there's responsiveness to the legislature. I'll just be honest.
So every 4 years, you've got to take a look, either reappointing or going and getting a new Department of Corrections commissioner.
Well, you can reappoint the same person, and
sure. But if it's a new governor, certainly if it's a new governor of a different party, that may or may not happen.
That's correct, but they may appoint someone. But you go back to the prior couple of prior.
But here's my problem again. I hate to bring this up again, but I'm just talking. This is away from politics. How much more difficult is it going to be to find a quality applicant, regardless of where he or she happens to be from, if they know that's the way it's going to be, only a 4-year deal?
Well, every job I take is, and particularly as it is legislatively, is a 4-year deal. So I've got to go back and answer to the people that I represent.
You understand that going in here, and you have another job. This is not your full-time job.
Well,
it's not the main. The legislature is not your main source of income for your livelihood.
But it's still, obviously, we go back to a 4-year thing. But let's go back.
Well, I understand that, but don't you agree that is a sizable difference in making a comparison of the two?
I think you can certainly say that. The problem is, are we wanting to give people guaranteed long-term employment with the state of Mississippi running an agency? Because Chris Epps was appointed by 3 governors. Mm-hmm. 3 governors.
Well, that's not a good example.
That's a great example. He was not advised and consented each time. So instead of actually the Senate looking at someone and saying, hey, we need to make sure everything's going the right way, if you just got reappointed, you were just, man, here we go. So
But I
think it's
mean,
good.
first of all, that can be done at any time with a peer committee or any of the state auditor or a lot of other different ways that needs to happen.
Well, I know this. When you ask for information from a particular agency and you're not receiving it as a legislator because they don't have to come back in front of you, it's a different issue.
I got to ask you this. This has nothing to do with what we're talking about, but I think it's just going to be one of those things that looms out there. And you being an outstanding lawyer, I got to ask you about this. The Ninth Circuit's decided that the COVID vaccine is not a vaccine. I saw that over the weekend. I said, wow, because you understand, all of these companies got immunity. The plaintiffs can now use this as cases go forward because Pfizer, Moderna, if they can be sued, this could be one of the biggest class action lawsuits ever in this country, other than tobacco.
I don't think there's any question, partly because of the forced nature of taking it. If you look back at, FinFin and some of these other lawsuits, those people made a choice to take that product, and to a great degree, with this particular vaccine, you saw a lot of pressurized situations or mandates to take it. And if you come back later and find out that there are issues, I think you've got some legal responsibility. But I assume that will be appealed up to the next level. But I do think that's a huge issue, particularly if they rule in that favor, and then ultimately other things come to light, because we go back to what we were talking about earlier. Money drives the majority of things that we see in government, and sometimes people have good intentions, but get swamped in.
Not only the physical aspect of a possible lawsuit, but the financial, where some people were fired for not taking it. They lost their jobs. Look at all of these servicemen and women who were kicked out of the military because they didn't take the vaccine.
Well, and I think that was probably one of the most shameful examples, because I spoke with a group of pretty elite folks in the military that had been able to avoid taking it for a period of time, and these were members who did great work, and they just weren't sure they were going to take it at all, and ultimately that mandate went away, I think, before they had to make that ultimate decision. But that's not a good look, and it takes your readiness down. It takes your best and brightest out of the approach.
State Senator Daniel Sparks from District 5 out of Wamba, Prentiss, Tishomingo counties. We are coming up. We got 3 more weeks before the end of the fiscal year, and you take a look. Have you seen some of the numbers?
I did see the numbers. The numbers in May weren't great. We were all $51 million for the month. That leaves us up about, I think, $134 for the year.
$134.8 million for the year, with 1 month remaining. So, but if you look at that, the legislature passed into law a $525 million tax cut in 2022. Do you think we're taking that in and it's working like it's supposed to?
I think so.
In other words, we understand there's going to be a dip in the income tax, personal income tax, because we cut it.
Yes, and we're about halfway through that, so that does make sense. I mean, you could easily look back and say there might be another, $225-30 million in there, but your sales tax revenue is up. Now, unfortunately, part of the reason your sales tax revenue is up is because inflation has driven the price of goods up, so that's going to push up sales tax in total. But I do think people having more disposable income in their pocket, they're going to spend it. So we've seen a trade-off there, but it's certainly something to keep an eye on, especially when we have collected interest income that we would normally not capture because of some of the reserves that we have, and interest rates again being high, that we're benefiting from that. So it's something to look at very closely.
You think there will be any appetite from the Senate to change its mind, because the governor's office, as far as the executive branch, they have already said that they're all in for having another decrease in the personal income tax. And, of course, the speaker said the same thing. The Senate seems to be the opposition for that, even going into the 2025 session.
I don't know that the Senate opposes income tax reduction. I certainly don't. But what I do oppose is cutting things in the blind and not addressing issues that are on the table. We just added $231 million to the education budget. I think that was great, doing a rewrite of the funding formula. I think we're focusing money where it should go, but that's $231 million that we've added to the process. We just put $110 million in PERS last year as a one-time infusion. I think yearly you're going to see a request for an infusion. We also allowed over a 5-year period a 2.5% increase on the employer side. That's going to equate to money. So while I certainly want to cut income taxes, somebody's going to have to show me where the funding mechanism is going to come from for core functions, including infrastructure. And there's a big discussion right now around how we fund infrastructure with our static gas tax.
July the 1st also means not only the start of the fiscal year, a lot of laws that were passed by the 2024 session become laws on July the 1st. Any of those that you'd like to highlight and the final thoughts when we return with State Senator Daniel Sparks in just a moment. For some reason. Just one little caveat on this Tyson Foods, which is a lot of concerns. People in Iowa, of course, when they close that plant, 1,200. But as far as them going out and actively hiring illegals, if that is the case, and I was looking at Mississippi, and this was noted on our C-Spire text line by several people, but we have apparently, and I was looking on the website, Carthage, Forest, Ceres plant in Vicksburg is where we have Tyson Foods in this state, so it does matter to us also. Final thoughts here. Where are we going as far as the Medicaid for next year?
I think that's a very interesting question. My take on it is that this program was set up for non-able-bodied people, and that it's a hard reach for me to try to provide an additional benefit to able-bodied people. And, the interesting thing is we changed the terminology to the working poor because that sounds a lot better than able-bodied. And then there were complaints when the Senate wanted a real work requirement. So you can't tell me this is for working people and then complain that there's a work requirement. I'm more interested in trying to bring good jobs to the region. I'm more interested in people prioritizing. And it's a subject matter that's hard for me because we also have ACA plans that until the end of 2025, the federal government has seen fit to subsidize up to probably 100% with a sliding scale on out-of-pockets, and nobody really wanted to talk about that for 2 years. They just pressed on expand. And you have to look at the payer mix. It's not going to be salvation to the rural hospitals. They've admitted that now. So every time there is an argument for it, they then come back later and say, well, it really won't do that, but we still think you should do it. So, again, it's a numbers issue. If someone's working 30 hours a week, making $10 an hour, they're going to qualify for a program on the exchange as a single able-bodied person without children. Now, is there a concern that I have for families of 4, parents, single parents who have children? Those children are covered under CHIPS, but that parent maybe is not insured. Yes, but let's actually focus. Let's target who we're trying to help. One of the things that happened this year and that will go into effect is that the state is going to create a state exchange and potentially run that state exchange, which would be able to use the federal tax credits, as I understand it, and also potentially draw down some additional funds. And maybe the state could look at a creative way to really targeting the people that are in that donut hole instead of just saying, let's give away something to someone else. The problem I have is that there is no right to health care. There is no right to housing. And more, the way we act is that there is a right to deliver it. What's the core functions of government? Education is a core function of state government, and we spend about $3 billion a year. We just added, as I said earlier, 231 million more dollars. Infrastructure, that's a core function. Public safety, that's a core function of government. We've gotten so far away from what the core functions of government are, is that every time there's a new something that comes up, people believe that the government ought to provide it, and that's not sustainable.
Yeah. In a lot of cases, though, we do provide stuff. Because you touched on something. How do you transition these folks? Let's say you're 25, 26 years old. You're in a job that's minimum wage or a little above. You cannot afford it. You're in that federal poverty line. and not qualified for Medicaid. How do you get to these folks and say, look, you're 25, 26 years old. This is not what you want to do. There are jobs open that we'll train you. We have the training there. The state has a multiple of assets on training in different agencies out there to point them out to it. How do you transition those folks to say, you don't have to stay in this job, let's train you for another job because they're open and we need you to take them? How do you do that?
That's the primary focus. And, of course, I didn't know I was going to be chair of this committee, when we came in January. But, I want to work with my, compadre down on the House end, Representative Donnie Bell. He's been very focused on the K-12 side. I think the first thing we do is not mess it up at K-12, that we actually are focused on high-wage, high-demand jobs with Accelerate, with our career coaches. And that's going to take a while to permeate. Then going back to the people that you're talking about, I think that we have to utilize our community colleges. I think we do have funds that are out there, a combination of federal and state funds, that if someone wants upward mobility, that we have to do that.
Yeah.
And we have those opportunities, and that's an investment in the state. The other thing is, and as the chair of Economic Workforce Development, I want to visit the areas that have been stagnant. Let's face it, the regions that are west of 55, we need to see what we can do over there, what has not been done, what opportunities are there, because we clearly know we have a population movement, but really I want to be targeted about what we're doing for workforce development, what we're doing with economic development, to make sure that Mississippians have an opportunity to earn what they need for themselves and their families. That gives you the freedom and independence that as conservatives we claim we want everyone to have.
Yep.
So
you have to do it to
Yes.
take that next level up and to solve the situation. State Senator Daniel Sparks, thank you, man. Appreciate you coming in.
Thank you all.